I'm a 34-year-old man. And 2 years ago, my wife Sarah was declared dead. She had gone on a solo hiking trip, something she used to do to clear her head. I wasn't thrilled about her going alone, but we'd had a few arguments leading up to it, and I figured maybe she just needed space. When she didn't return after the weekend, I contacted the local authorities. Search and rescue teams combed the trail she told me she'd be taking. After 2 days, they found her backpack near the edge of a cliff. Her phone, wallet, and jacket were inside. The weather had been rough that week, strong winds, rain, and loose terrain. They concluded she had fallen and been swept away by the river below. Her parents organized a closed casket funeral within the week. They said the body couldn't be recovered due to the dangerous terrain, and the rescue efforts were officially called off. I remember standing there during the funeral like everything around me was underwater. My family stood beside me, especially my younger sister and my best friend from college, who both checked in on me constantly. For the first month, I barely left the house. I took a year off work and ended up selling our home because I couldn't stand walking into the kitchen and seeing her coffee mug still sitting in the sink. I moved into a smaller apartment and gave away most of Sarah's belongings, some to charity, some to her parents. I kept only a few things. A couple of her handmade necklaces, a recipe book she wrote in, and the dog collar from our golden retriever Max, who had passed a year before she vanished. That collar sat on my bookshelf like a memorial to the life I used to have. Time passed, life went on, or at least it tried to. I started working again. My sister helped me set up a new routine. I wasn't okay, but I wasn't where I had been either. Then 2 years later, something happened that flipped everything upside down again. I was looking for a small gift for a coworker on Facebook Marketplace, something handmade, and I came across a profile selling jewelry. At first, it was the style of the necklaces that caught my attention. They looked just like the ones Sarah used to make. But then I saw the profile photo. The woman looked exactly like Sarah. Her hair was dyed dark red, cut shorter, but her eyes, nose, and smile were unmistakable. The username was different, a new name entirely. But the background of the photo stopped me cold. Behind her on the shelf was a ceramic mug from a pottery class we took years ago, and next to that, Max's collar, the exact one, same tag, same scratch near the buckle. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I took screenshots and made a new account to message her, just asking about one of the necklaces. Within 5 minutes, the account had blocked me. That's when I knew something wasn't right. I reached out to an old friend, who now works as a private investigator. I told him everything what I found, what I suspected, and asked him to find out who this woman really was. He didn't promise anything, just said he'd look into it. 2 weeks later, he came back to me with a full report. The woman in the Marketplace profile was living 2 towns over from me, under a legally changed name. She had government-issued documents, a new driver's license, a new social security number, and no public records tying her to her old life. According to the state, Sarah had never existed. I didn't know what to do. I took the report and went straight to my sister's place. She greeted me casually until I handed her the manila folder with the photos, the address, and the name change confirmation. She stared at it for maybe 3 seconds before her face drained of all color. She didn't even deny it. The first thing out of her mouth was, "How did you find out?" She didn't offer any excuses, just kept saying she was sorry and that it was complicated. I pressed harder. Eventually, she cracked and told me that both our mother and Sarah's parents had known Sarah was alive all along. My family, the people I leaned on when I thought she was dead, had been part of it. I asked why. Why would they help her fake her death? Why lie to me for 2 years? She wouldn't answer, or maybe she couldn't. She just kept repeating that she didn't have a choice, that it wasn't her place to say anything. I left without another word. I didn't go home. I just drove around for hours trying to understand what the hell had happened to my life. Sarah faked her death, and the people closest to me helped her do it. That's where it all started, but trust me, this was only the beginning. After confronting my sister and learning that my own family had helped Sarah disappear, I got in my car and drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't call ahead. I didn't care what time it was. I pulled up to the driveway just before midnight. The lights were still on. My mother opened the door and froze when she saw me. I didn't waste time. I walked in and demanded to know the truth. I told her I knew Sarah was alive, but I had seen the Marketplace account that I had proof. I said I knew Sarah had changed her name, and that she was living just a short drive away. I asked if she was involved. She didn't deny it. She sat down on the edge of the couch and rubbed her forehead. She told me Sarah had come to them a few months before she disappeared. She said Sarah was scared, claimed she felt emotionally controlled and manipulated. My mother looked uncomfortable while saying it, like she didn't quite believe it herself. I asked her what Sarah meant by that, what I supposedly did that made her feel unsafe. My father stayed quiet the whole time, arms crossed, staring at the floor. All I got in response were vague lines. "You didn't see how tense she was, and she said you always needed to be right." I asked why nobody talked to me, why nobody told me anything, why they let me go through a funeral and 2 years of grief if they knew she was alive. No answer. Just silence. My mother said she didn't know how to stop it. Once it had started, I left without slamming the door, but I made sure they knew I was done with both of them. I haven't spoken to my parents since that night. I tried to call Sarah's parents next. Her father picked up as soon as I said my name and hung up. I tried again straight to voicemail. I drove to their house the next morning and knocked on the door. Her mother opened a crack, saw me, and shut it immediately. I knocked again. Her father came out onto the porch, told me I was harassing them, and said he'd call the police. I told him I just wanted to talk. He stepped off the porch and started yelling for me to leave the property. I walked back to my car while he stood there watching me go. I called the private investigator and asked him to dig deeper. I told him I needed everything, how Sarah had faked the death, who was involved, and if anything illegal had been done. He started working immediately. 2 days later, he sent me a file. It included documents showing the death certificate had been filed with no recovered body, the cause listed as presumed fall from hazardous terrain, and the person who signed off on it was a longtime family friend, a retired officer from our town who'd worked part-time at the sheriff's office. According to the file, no autopsy had ever been performed, no remains had been found, nothing but a backpack and bad weather. I made a new burner profile and tried to message Sarah again. I didn't threaten, didn't accuse, just said I wanted to talk. 10 minutes later, the account was blocked again. I used the report to look up property records tied to her new identity. One listing popped up, a cabin about an hour away in a remote wooded area, purchased 6 months after her supposed death. I drove out there. The place was empty, no car, no lights, nothing. I knocked on the neighbor's door. An older woman answered and said the lady who lived in the cabin had left 2 days earlier. When I asked if anyone had come by recently, she said a man in a dark car had shown up the day before the woman left, asking questions. Looked like someone had tipped her off. I went to the local police in that area and explained what I'd found. They told me since Sarah had a new legal identity and I didn't have proof of fraud or danger, there wasn't anything they could do. I asked if the forged death certificate counted. They told me that would be a matter for a different department and that I'd need legal representation to pursue it. I went home and wrote a full summary of everything I had so far. I sent it anonymously to a legal advice forum and included redacted copies of the property documents, the death certificate, and a timeline of events. I avoided sharing any real names or personal details but included enough that someone familiar with the law could follow what had happened. Later that night, I received a message through the forum's anonymous response feature. A lawyer specializing in insurance and identity fraud asked if I was open to a consultation. I called the number he provided. He confirmed that what I was describing could qualify as conspiracy, document forgery, and insurance fraud, depending on the payout structure. The next day, I went back through the marketplace screenshots. The jewelry listings had been taken down, the profile was deleted, every trace of it was gone. That's when I realized someone on my side must have warned Sarah. The only people I had spoken to directly were my sister and my parents. My parents wouldn't have known the specifics of what I had found, but my sister had seen the investigator's report. I started preparing to confront her again. This time, not to ask questions but to get answers. And if she didn't want to give them willingly, I was ready to make sure she had no choice. I went to my sister's house unannounced. This time, I didn't bother being gentle. I walked in with printed records. The private investigator's report, screenshots, and emails. I put everything on her kitchen table and told her I wasn't leaving without answers. If she lied or refused, I'd go to the police and bring up conspiracy and obstruction. She broke down. After a few minutes, she admitted it. Sarah had called her a few months before she vanished, panicked, crying, saying she couldn't take it anymore. According to her, Sarah felt trapped in the marriage and didn't think anyone would believe her if she filed for divorce. She was convinced I'd manipulate the situation and that disappearing was the only way out. I asked why no one tried to help in a legal or professional way: mediation, therapy, counseling, anything. My sister said Sarah didn't want to take that path. She thought Sarah wasn't mentally stable enough to follow a normal route. Everyone around her believed the story and went along with it. They didn't think through what it would do to me. Then she mentioned something I hadn't even considered. There had been a life insurance policy, a joint one we took out early in our marriage. I thought it had expired and never been renewed, but after Sarah disappeared, someone filed a claim on it. I called the lawyer the next day and asked him to look into the policy. He found it had been quietly reactivated a year before Sarah's disappearance. The beneficiary listed wasn't me, it had been changed to Sarah's mother. The paperwork had been signed using a power of attorney Sarah granted to her mother before she vanished. I called the private investigator again and asked him to look through old email accounts, backups, and message recoveries. A week later, he came back with everything, archived messages between Sarah, her parents, and my sister. They'd outlined the whole plan: dates, locations, legal loopholes, even instructions on how to disappear without leaving a trail. I organized all of it. Every document, message, and photo went into a digital archive, sorted in time-stamped order. I made copies and stored them on separate drives. Then I contacted the insurance company, sent a formal notification of suspected fraud, and submitted the digital proof. They responded by freezing the policy's payout account while they launched their own internal investigation. Update 2. When my sister realized how serious things had become, she blocked my number in all social media accounts. I didn't try to reach her again. As far as I'm concerned, she's no longer family. With the evidence compiled, my lawyer helped me file a civil lawsuit against Sarah's parents and my sister. We cited conspiracy to commit fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and unlawful enrichment. I wasn't just after the money, I wanted everything out in the open. I went to my workplace and sat down with HR. I explained the general situation, left out names, but made it clear that an illegal case involving me might gain attention soon. They appreciated the honesty and made a note of it, offering to refer me to a legal support firm if I needed it. 3 days later, I got an email forwarded to my lawyer. A legal journalist who specialized in identity fraud and staged disappearances had been tipped off anonymously. They wanted to speak with me and requested access to the case materials. We called a meeting. I gave them access to redacted versions of the files, removing any personal identifiers, and made it clear I wanted to stay anonymous for now. They agreed. A few days after that, another email arrived. This time from Sarah's lawyer. They requested a legally supervised meeting between both parties, with law enforcement present. The meeting would be recorded, and no direct contact outside legal channels would be allowed. It was clear they were trying to protect Sarah while still testing the waters for possible negotiation. I didn't respond right away. I forwarded the email to my attorney and waited for his advice. But I already knew one thing for certain. I wasn't walking away this time. Too many people had helped her vanish, and too many of them thought they'd never face consequences. The meeting was going to happen, and when it did, I was going to make sure the truth came out recorded, documented, and impossible to deny. The meeting with Sarah was scheduled at a neutral location, a legal conference room downtown with glass walls and a mounted camera. A police officer sat in the corner. My lawyer and I arrived first, followed by Sarah and her attorney. She walked in head down, didn't look at me. Once the officer turned on the recording device and confirmed all parties were present, her lawyer started by laying out their narrative. According to them, Sarah had staged her death because of emotional distress. They claimed she felt overwhelmed and controlled, and that the idea of disappearing seemed safer than trying to fight through a divorce. I let them finish without interruption. When they were done, I opened my folder and handed over a USB drive. My lawyer explained what was on it: timestamped emails, digital messages, and planning documents between Sarah, her parents, and my sister. The files showed discussions about how to disappear, how to change names legally, how to avoid detection, and even how to time the fake death to match a weekend storm. We addressed the coroner's report next. I brought out a printed copy showing how it had been filed by a retired officer, a known friend of Sarah's family, despite nobody ever being found. We highlighted that the death certificate contained language pulled from a generic template and was filed unusually fast. Then we moved on to the life insurance policy. I had records showing the policy had been modified with the beneficiary changed to Sarah's mother, just months before the staged disappearance. My lawyer asked Sarah directly who filled out the change forms. She didn't answer. Her lawyer said Sarah had no access to the money, that her parents handled everything. They claimed she never benefited financially from any of it and had only agreed to vanish out of fear. They floated the idea of a compromise. Sarah might cooperate, but only if criminal charges were taken off the table. We refused. My lawyer said we would not agree to immunity for someone who orchestrated a fake death, allowed her husband to mourn for years, and committed document fraud. We were open to reducing her civil liability if she gave us full cooperation and named every person involved. Then they pushed for blanket immunity for Sarah, her parents, my sister, and the officer who signed the report. I stood up and told them there was no deal. We weren't negotiating with criminals. The meeting ended minutes later. Sarah still hadn't said a word. She walked out the same way she came in, head down, eyes on the floor. That same evening, I filed a formal complaint with the local police department about the falsified coroner's documents. I submitted the evidence, listed the people involved, and asked for an internal review of how a death certificate was issued without a confirmed body. I made sure to include all supporting timelines. After that, I contacted a second journalist. This one worked for a national investigative outlet and had experience covering identity fraud. I gave them access to the full unredacted file, everything. Names, dates, files, photos, even the screenshots from the Marketplace account. Their team began reviewing immediately, confirming authenticity and tracing the network of people involved in the background. Final update. While all of this was unfolding, I received a legal notice from Sarah's parents. They were filing a countersuit against me for harassment and reputational harm. My lawyer wasn't surprised. He said it was a delay tactic, probably to discourage me from pushing forward. But we were prepared. I went back to my workplace and met again with Human Resources. I explained what had developed, the civil lawsuit, the upcoming criminal charges, the media involvement. They looped in a senior advisor and connected me to their legal protection partner. They also offered to update my internal record so I wouldn't face repercussions if any of this became public. At this point, every piece was in motion. Civil court was coming. Criminal investigations were active. The media was watching. And no one involved could hide behind fake names or forged papers anymore. My friend uploaded the video timeline we'd been working on. It went live under a newly created anonymous channel with no links to me. The footage started with clips from Sarah's disappearance and ended with screen recordings of the Marketplace profile, timestamps, voiceover narration of the timeline, and screenshots of key evidence. Within 48 hours, it started picking up traction. Forums began sharing it. Independent investigators and legal commentators started stitching together the facts. The most common comment was disbelief that something like this could actually happen without anyone stepping in sooner. Not long after, a major national news outlet reached out. Their editorial team had reviewed the video and traced the related legal filings. They wanted confirmation and asked for an exclusive report. I agreed under one condition: my name and personal identifiers would remain protected. They agreed, and their fact-checking team coordinated with my attorney to verify each document. Then I got called into my company's HR office. I expected the worst, but instead, the tone was surprisingly calm. They said they'd seen mentions of an anonymous case involving life insurance fraud and a fake death and wanted to clarify if it was connected to me. I confirmed it, explained the measures I'd taken, and reminded them they already had the file I'd submitted earlier for transparency. They didn't ask me to step down or go on leave. Later that day, a few coworkers quietly stopped by my office to check in. Some just nodded before walking away. A few left short notes of support. While that was happening, the private investigator sent over an urgent update. Sarah's new identity had been supported by forged government records. The driver's license, birth certificate, and name change were all processed with internal access. The link. A longtime family friend of Sarah's mother, who worked in the county records office. The documents weren't just fake, they had been entered into the official system. Law enforcement followed up quickly. Sarah's mother was brought in for questioning. According to someone inside the station, she broke down and admitted to arranging the fraudulent identity through her friend. She claimed she thought it would be temporary, just to let Sarah reset her life. The records department employee was placed on immediate leave, and an internal government probe was opened to investigate how many other fake identities may have been processed under similar circumstances. The countersuit Sarah's parents filed was officially thrown out. The judge dismissed it with prejudice, citing procedural manipulation and overwhelming contradictory evidence. Their lawyer tried to delay by requesting an extension, but it was denied. My lawyer then filed a request to freeze all assets connected to the life insurance payout, bank accounts, investment accounts, and the cabin purchased in Sarah's alias. The judge granted a temporary freeze while the investigation progressed. That same week, one of my cousins tried to call me. I didn't answer. Then they messaged, saying my sister wanted to talk again. That she had more to explain. Despite having already confessed everything earlier, I blocked the cousin immediately. I had made it clear, anyone who tried to act as a bridge for her was cutting themselves off from me for good. I haven't spoken to either of them since. 3 days later, I got an email with no name, no subject. Attached were 6 vacation photos. They showed Sarah in Greece at a beachside villa. The metadata confirmed the data 6 months before I found her marketplace profile. Her legal team had previously claimed she'd spent that time in mental health treatment at a private facility. The GPS data embedded in the images matched a luxury rental booked under her alias. I sent the files to the private investigator and asked him to trace the payment trail, plane tickets, lodging, meals, anything that connected her alias to actual expenses. He started digging immediately and uncovered purchases linked to a foreign travel agency with ties to a prepaid account in her new name. After the photos surfaced, Sarah's lawyer contacted my legal team again. This time, their tone had changed. They wanted another meeting. Their offer was full disclosure names, timelines, access to original documents in exchange for avoiding federal charges. My lawyer reviewed the request and responded with clear terms. There would be no deal unless Sarah signed a full confession, returned every document tied to her alias, and accepted financial restitution. Meanwhile, I got a call from the detective leading the review of the death certificate. He told me the officer who signed off on it, the same family friend of Sarah's parents, was now being investigated separately. Preliminary findings showed he had signed off on several questionable documents in past years. They believed he may have accepted a bribe to finalize Sarah's death certificate without ever seeing a body. The pressure was building from all sides. What started as a staged disappearance was now unraveling as a full-scale fraud investigation, with legal, financial, and government systems caught in the middle. Every day brought something new, and none of it was slowing down.